We're getting ourselves organized. This is so fun. Good morning. I'm Susan. I've got my cup of coffee and it says, I will start working when my coffee does. Isn't that the truth? So welcome. I'm Susan Smith. We're in my studio, Stitched by Susan. Today we're broadcasting on YouTube. So if you enjoy this video, please take a moment to like and subscribe. I would appreciate that. And also if you hit the little bell after you've subscribed, then you'll get notifications whenever a new episode comes up. But in general, I am here the first and third Monday morning of each month, quilting a project in real time.
Where's the microphone?
1 second. Twisted. Okay, hang on a second. Bear with us.
Hold on. Let me take you down.
Okay, hang on a second while we get organized. See, the little mic thingies go over my ears, and so do my glasses. So there's always... I can push it back, Dave. I got it. Okay, how's that sounding? People nod or smile. Hope I didn't deafen you talking into the mic. These are the joys. Sounding good? Okay. Maybe I'll just start sort of again. I'm Susan Smith. You're in my studio, Stitched by Susan. Today I'll be quilting a project in real time from beginning to end. So these projects, as you've gathered, are recorded live. They're not edited and not scripted, and so funny things happen from time to time. Anyway, today we're working on a lap quilt sized project. I was able to get a picture up this morning. I don't always get that done in advance so you can see the colors and things that we're working on. But let's see what else while we wait for a few people to join. Would you type in where you're joining from? We love to know who's watching in the mornings. And take a moment to like and subscribe, please, if you find these videos to be helpful. And if you hit the little bell, then you'll receive notifications when these episodes, when new episodes are uploaded. And in general, these are the first and the third Monday of every month. And usually it is an edge-to-edge freehand project. Every so often I slip a special one in there, but usually that's the type of quilting. So my goal is to just show the big picture of completing a quilt. So for those who maybe aren't as far in their long arming journey or maybe are just beginning, it can be difficult it can be daunting. You know, there's so many decisions to be made. Just adjusting the mic still. Dave's giving me violent signs. Is that good enough? Sounding better? When you're newer to long arming, it can be very daunting to load a quilt, to make all the decisions that need making about thread or whether to float a top or to roll a top, or how do you keep it square? How do you keep it straight? And even as you go along, there's always tips that you pick up from working alongside someone, right? And so with long arming, that's not all that easy because we never work alongside someone else. So I hope that this will provide some of that continuity and community is maybe a better word for you, so that you can just see the big picture of a quilt being completed. So for that reason too, we usually have a close-up camera on the actual quilting, and then we have a bigger one that shows the whole machine and me working, so that you can get that kind of 10,000 foot view of the process as I'm going through it. So, and coffee is really important to me, which those of you who watch regularly know, at least my morning coffee. I don't drink it all day, but I do love it in the morning. So these episodes are free to anyone wanting to join. But if you do wish to support me, you can go to buymeacoffee.com, and there you can either do a one-time contribution, or if you wish, you can join the Coffee and Cream membership, which is $5 a month, or just a one-time of $5. And that just helps us upgrade our equipment. Last time I was on air, I talked about a new camera that we have got that is loaded on Lucy now, so you'll see it's much clearer than episodes, say, a month ago were. So that was the first major purchase that we made with our coffee money. So we do appreciate that, and we love to have you join in, and we appreciate the support. So that's how you can support if you wish to. One more sip, and then we'll get started.
Say hello to people?
Let's see who's chiming in. Here we come. Judy, it went away. I've seen your name before, Judy. Good morning. From Georgia. Diane Cormo, good morning. Marie from Georgia also. Cindy from Arkansas. Mickey from North Georgia Mountains. A few of you are very familiar. I'm so glad you join regularly. I appreciate that. That's fun. And Marie is smiley face. Jeannie McNeil, my fellow Canadian. Good morning. Andrea from a very hot UK. Wow. So what does hot mean to you? Give us a temperature. Diane is in Vermont. Jeannie, yeah, beachside New Brunswick. Oh, nice that you get to be on the beach. Jill from Lake Vermilion near the BWCA in northern Minnesota. It's raining for the first time in 4 weeks. Yay! I know we would welcome some rain. We're quite surrounded by forest fires right now and a lot of smoke in the air. Fairly poor air quality. I missed one going by. I think it was Charity. Troy and Charity. I assume it's Charity watching. Welcome. And from South Africa now. See, I'm going to get your name all messed up. Can I just call you Anne? Anyway, welcome. And Carrie, good morning, everyone. Monica from Calgary, Alberta, cool and smoky here. Yeah, we're on the same side of the country, probably seeing some of the same smoke particles. So, Andrea, 30 Celsius. So, gosh, Dave, do we know how to convert that? I'm Canadian, so I read in Celsius too, but Fahrenheit, that's well into the 90s. So, and Sherry from Southern Oregon, that's not too far away. Monica, great. Good. Well, thank you all for joining. I'm so glad that you're here. And, oh, Susan Clark, one more from Charleston, South Carolina. A few of you I noticed are names that are students in my masterclass quilting studio, and I'm so glad you take the time to join in too. These are kind of supplementary and hopefully still helpful to you to get another view. I'm just going to move Lucy out of the way. Lucy is my long arm, and she is a 26-inch throat gamble. Gamble Elevate specifically. So the Elevate means that I do have a kind of entry-level computerized system on Lucy, which I use in perhaps one quilt in 40. So that gives you a pretty good idea. I'm all about freehand quilting, and that's what we're doing today. Monica from Melrose, Minnesota, first time watching you. Well, I'm so glad you have joined, and I hope that you will enjoy this. And this is very much an interactive show, so be typing in questions, and I'll pause from time to time for Dave to scroll them across the screen for me and to answer them for you. And we're just going to adjust the camera here because we have cords running. In a dream world, we have cordless cameras, but so far that doesn't happen, so we're always dealing with cables. So as promised, I'm going to spend a wee bit of time talking about the loading process today because this quilt is nice and flat and square and doesn't have other challenges that I need to address, so I thought this might be helpful to show my loading process. And to clarify, this is not the way to load a quilt, it's my way, and some other people's way too. So there's more than one way, but see if this one might be useful for you, and I'll tell you why I do some of the things. So I use the red snapper system, which this rod is part of. And basically the way it works is my leader has a thin little rod in the hem on this bar and on the other end of my backing bar. And so this is an open channel. I cannot make it so that you can see it. There we go. And that channel just snaps over top of the bar in the leader. So it's really quick to load. Dave will throw up some links for you if you're interested in them. They can be found in different quilting shops. On Amazon, they're not that rare. What's beautiful about them is their speed. So I can just line up the edge of my backing along the hem of my leader. I've already checked that this edge is nice and straight. And then I just snap, 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 taking care not to stretch this. So either know your fabric so that you know how much to pull it so that it's flat and snug but not stretched, or maybe loosely pin in a few places first if you're not confident about getting that on there flat, because that's important to the look of your finished quilt. I do cut a few corners just because I've done so many quilts and I feel pretty confident in it, but there's ways that you can kind of put a check and balance in there for yourself. And one would be pinning. The red snapper system actually comes with some tiny short little pieces, so you can use them almost as basters. So that's another way to do it. And I always put a kind of disclaimer when I'm talking about the red snappers. They do take a certain amount of hand strength. So if that's not something that goes smoothly for you, if you have, trouble with your hands, these might not be a great option. But for me, they have proven to be by far the fastest way. I should say too, if you don't have this system, for a long time, for hundreds of quilts actually, I pinned. So the same basic method that I'm going to show you today, except that I pinned to the leader. But here's where the magic of this loading method comes in. I have now tossed my backing just over my further roller, which is going to hold the other end of my backing. And different machines are slightly different in where their rollers are organized, so you might have to convert a little bit. But the magic lies here. I do not have to mark the center of my backing. You saw when I loaded it, I didn't mark the center. I just made it smooth and straight. And now when I spread it over my rail, I again make it smooth and straight. And I take care that this always remains smooth with no wrinkles, no, if there were creases, if it was pulling to one side or the other, watch this. Do you see how you get the look of creases in there? So that alerts you it's not straight. So make sure it's straight and smooth all the way down the back of your machine. And now you can just roll it on and be confident that it is straight. This is so fast and so speedy. And I just roll until I see that it's extending a little way past my leader on the other side. That's where you may need to convert depending on how your rails are arranged. Different brands are a bit different. Make sure it's nice and smooth. There's no excess fabric. There's no stretching of fabric. It's nice and flat. And here again, a piece of magic. This quilt is nice and straight, this backing, but if by chance I had one that had some unevenness, I do not need to pre-measure, square that up beforehand. I will just load it straight because I know this is straight along the rail now. So I'm going to put my red snappers along and this edge is taken care of. So whether or not it came to me straight, my quilt will be straight. Does that make sense? So this is where the huge time saver comes in, because if you're working with a big backing and trying to square it up prior to loading, that can really take some time. It's difficult. So for this method, you basically just need the front edge to be straight. And if you roll it on smoothly, all the other edges, the excess will just be taken care of when you trim the quilt afterwards. And I breathe a little heavily when I do that. It does take a little exertion. And I get my steps in, walking around Lucy. And just like that, we have a loaded backing. Can you see? Nice and smooth, nice and flat. Perfect. Now, batting is next. I'm using today my personal favorite, which is Hobbs 8020. My personal favorite in the sense that I use it the most often on quilts. It's I feel like the most suitable for the most style of quilts. I do have other battings that I love for other reasons and other applications. Oh, I've got a fold in there. Hang on a sec. So this is Hobbs 8020, so that's 80% cotton, 20% poly. Some of the things I like about it are that little bit of poly makes it a little bit loftier. I quite like that. You get a wee bit more fluffiness. It also keeps it from having kind of a fold memory. So when you fold your quilt to put it in the closet and then you pull it back out, you know how it has those nasty creases sometimes? This does a little less creasing and it's really economical. So those are some of the reasons I like Hobbs 8020. So again, I've just laid it flat and I'm just eyeballing that it's straight along my rails at the top. If I wasn't confident about that, I could actually put the channel lock on my machine and run a perfectly straight line of stitching across the top to match the top of my quilt up too. That would help me have a perfect line. I'm going to be comfortable eyeballing it today because I do have my red snappers, which are in a perfectly straight line that I can gauge to as well. So here comes our little top. This belongs to a client. Her name is Laura. And she is on a mission to use up her existing fabric. So she's been sending me a number of scrappy quilts. And I've just done a couple of them in this kind of navy and cream colorway. Very pretty. So again, I have not specifically measured the center of my quilt top. I could, but I'm eyeballing that it's approximately in the center of my backing. And I do want to do that because the backing, as you saw, was pieced and it's symmetrical. Those seams are symmetrical. So I don't want to put the top of it all to one side, or that would look a little odd when I trim it up later. Okay, it's on. Nice and smooth. And the next, oh, hang on. We've got some cord issues here. Okay, that's about as far as I'll need to go later, and that should be good. All right. So did I mention my husband Dave is the producer, so he'll probably show a shot of himself sitting behind a bewildering array of monitors and wires and cables and things. So he's the person that I'm often talking to kind of out of the side of my mouth about adjustments and things. Hang on, people. I need my glasses. I wondered why everything looked so fuzzy. Now I know. All right, this is what I call a simple baste. It is merely going around the outline of the quilt at within the 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm between 1/8 and 1/4 inch. My Lucy does have what's called a channel lock. It's a magnetic hold on the rails. So I've got the vertical channel lock on right now. So she is stitching in a perfectly vertical line. And I'm making tiny adjustments to my quilt so that I stay within that seam allowance, and then I know that my quilt has a straight edge because of that channel lock. Can see better because I do want to point this out. This is a tip you might use really frequently. Okay. Back to the quilt. So we have a number of seam allowances across the top of this quilt. And if I don't pay attention, they're apt to stretch. They might even come apart, but for sure they're apt to stretch. It's very easy to stretch out this edge. So what I do to compensate for that is I keep a little bit of tension on the side that's already stitched. If I did not do that, my machine would be apt to just push that line out in front of me, and those seams would gradually stretch out further and further. So again, if you're not comfortable doing this sort of by guess and by gosh like I'm doing it, then go ahead and put some pins every so often along this top edge so that, you know, every 6 inches or 12, you've got a checkpoint, if you will, to know that you're on track. And a quilt, by the way, that has a great many seams along this edge, if it's your own quilt, or even if it's a client's, you might feel comfortable recommending to them that they do what I call a victory lap. And that's just to run a line of stitching really near to the edge, like 1/8 of an inch from the edge, to prevent these seams from coming open. But you can see how just my little bit of tension just pulls the fabric that little bit faster under the needle and keeps everything smooth. A few weeks back, I quilted a project that had really wavy borders and a lot of excess fabric, and I showed some ways for dealing with a severe amount of, wave on these edges. And that is one of the methods, is just to push harder on that and put more tension on it. But for this quilt, just a little is needed. And I kind of do the same thing on this edge too. I'm always watching that it's going under there as fast as it should. And do you see how I'm pulling the bit that's already stitched just a little? And that just pulls what's in the front under the needle a hair faster. And keeps everything nice and square. So now, because I had my channel locks on, I know that I have 90-degree corners. I have a straight vertical line across the top, and a straight horizontal line across the top, and a straight vertical down each side. I know that this top edge of my quilt is square. So I'm going to advance it just a little bit because I can't fit my side stretchers on. There we go. All right, so one last step, which you can't really see there, but you can maybe see it from the other end, is I'm putting stretchers onto the side. Now, the ones I'm using are also part of the Red Snapper system. But if you don't have those, then I just recommend that you try to find ones that are as long as will fit in the area of your quilting machine. To me, it's really beneficial to have this equal tension all the way along as opposed to a clamp pulling, a clamp pulling, a clamp pulling. Now, if clamps are all you have, by all means go with it. Just don't make them too tight. They need to be a really gentle tug so that you don't get that scallopy pull toward each clamp. But if and when you can, I recommend looking for side clamps that have as much length here as you have clearance in your machine. It really helps. Okay, any more people want to say good morning before we dive in? I need another sip of coffee too, folks, before we start sewing. I'll be careful not to lean over the quilt at all.
Okay, we have...
I have to take my glasses off to read the screen. The comments scroll on the screen, and I can only see close things with my glasses and far things with my own eyes. Sterling Chuck, Alaska. Yay! Kathy from Cle Elum, Washington. That's not too far from me. And Darlene, good morning from Montana City, Montana. Oh, no apologies for being late. No worries. Nell Summerlin from North Carolina. And Anitra, wonderful advice. I usually stay stitch around my quilts if they are pieced on the edges. Yes, that is an absolute foolproof method, but lots of my clients don't do that, and so it's good to know how to deal with that. Lisa from Wisconsin, great. Welcome. And that's it. Fantastic. Okay, one more little sip. And we're in business. Now, on this quilt, my client Laura does not care for curvy lines of quilting on straight lines of sewing. So we're actually going to quilt something with straight lines on here as well. One last thing, though, I do need to put my bars on the front. And maybe I'll just take a moment and talk about that. The phrase floating top, let me get under the camera. The phrase floating top is bandied about among quilters, and not everyone knows what that means. So let me give you a quick show. The front of my quilt is hanging down here in front of me, floating. It is not actually rolled up or attached to anything. I think I do 100% of my quilts that way. And I take different precautions if I have a double batting or maybe a show quilt that I'm really trying to get square. There are some extra precautions, but for the purposes of most quilting, all I do is use these magnetic bars along the front. So now I've got basting here, basting here, basting down the left side, and this magnetic bar holding this side straight. This quilting area is not shifting anywhere. So it's just that simple. And you'll see when I go to advance the quilt how simple of a process it is. So there's my bars. Dave's putting a link in the window. I know he is. Question, Teresa, just a good morning. Lincolnton, Georgia via Panama City Beach, where I'm currently on vacation. Awesome. Lucky you. And I feel honored that you're taking a minute to be with us on vacation. Okay, couple more things. Can they see me on the left? Nope, but I'll show it. Here we go. No, we can see it. This is my trusty yardstick that was my grandpa's. It's older than me. I use this just to elevate my clamp on the side. You can see how the weight of all of this is kind of pulling my fabric down, and I'm apt to run into this when I come over here quilting. Although I probably won't quilt near to the edge, but I'll show you anyways. All I do is slip this under here and move it back and forth depending on how much elevating I'm needing. Any straight thing will work here. The type of curtain rods that are extendable and have the hook that bends down on each end work perfectly. Little piece of PVC pipe, whatever long straight object you have really helps with that. Alrighty, we're ready to quilt. I've got my thread already loaded. I chose to use a tan that is similar to, well, there's just one kind of creamy linen in here. It's a bit darker than this creamy linen, probably 2 shades darker, so that it doesn't really highly contrast with the navy, if that makes sense. There is some linen or tan colors within some of the navy prints, so that's what I kind of tried to match. So what we're quilting today I call mod boxes, and they're just this very organic, overlapping, interlocking set of boxes. There is no pattern to this. I just freestyle it completely. You need to have a sense before you get going of how close you want the quilting to be. And because a lot of the little patchwork squares are about 2 inches, I'm going to say to myself, I don't want any unquilted areas bigger than 2 inches. So that's going to kind of be my guideline. And it's really easy to adjust because you just go back and overlap with more boxes wherever you need more quilting. And now I'll quilt for a few minutes without talking because I do a much neater job when I'm not talking at the same time. Okay, I'll stop for a second to point something out. We are seeing the overhead camera. Can we make that the big one for a moment, Dave? This will be clearer. This is one of the advantages of a big picture view. I'm not going to talk in detail about the quilting design today, but overall, what I'm aiming for, I started in this corner, I'm going to move in a kind of diagonal way across my quilt top. And the reason for that is I don't want to quilt all my boxes all down here in front of me and then find out, oh man, I've got a little funny corner up there that I've missed and it's really hard to get back to it now. This design is fairly easy to travel with, but with some other designs, that would really throw a spanner in the works. And so my goal then is to extend up here and then come back and finish the front of the quilt and to move basically diagonally across the quilt top. Does that make sense? So you'll see that in the overhead view. So be watching for that. And then one other thing I'll note is this mod box design I've done in 2 ways. One is with sharp 90-degree corners on the boxes. And then I started doing it with these little curves. I find it softens it just a little, and it's actually easier to quilt because you don't have to pause and stop in those corners. But certainly that variation is a possibility. Can you see how easy this one is to travel with? I can cross over lines as many times as I need to. So that does make this pattern very easy to get even coverage or to adjust my coverage. If I look back and see an area that I think doesn't have quite enough quilting, pretty easy to go back and just work my way there and add in another box. It's really important that you relax with this design, at least on my machine. Lucy wants to quilt in a straight line, so if I just give her a nudge in the right direction and keep her moving, she'll make a nice straight line for me. But when I try too hard, grip the handlebars too hard to guide them, that's when I get wobbles. And on the heels of that, I'll put a little caveat. This is not perfect either. This is hand done. But it does go better when I stay really relaxed. I feel like we need some spa or zen type music on for this. I think Dave has some guitar music playing. And that, by the way, is our good friend Dan, who's a wonderful guitar player and has graciously allowed us to use his music on our lives. So I can't hear it, but probably you guys are getting some nice, soft music in your ears. It's not a bad idea, even when you are quilting, to create that kind of atmosphere. Especially when you've got one like this that you just really need to relax for. It's not the time to put your dancing music on. So if you have any questions, be typing them into the chat window when I get to the end of this pass, which is only about 12 inches away. I'll talk for a little bit while I advance the quilt. So questions about thread or tension or the design itself, let me know. here we are at the edge. So I'm just going to quickly look back over to make sure I am happy with the evenness of my coverage, because you know, you're kind of looking at things really close up as you're quilting, and just to make sure there's no big gaping expanses that have no quilting. And I think I'm happy with it. So I will undo my side strapping and magnets along the front while we look at some questions. Michelle, what kind of design would you have done if the client was okay with curves, or it was totally your choice? No, my client and I conferred on this. And you know, maybe just a little plug in here for being really conscious of your client's taste. I think if this was mine, I would have chosen to put something with curves on something that had so much linear piecing, but that's my taste. And I acknowledge that it's my client that I'm aiming to please, right? And so we conferred, and I sent her a couple of drawings and pictures of things I've done in the past, that sort of thing. And so this is what we then agreed on. I mean, there's any number of things that you could do for sure. Which camera am I on, Dave? I'm good. Okay. Anitra, this design reminds me of Art Deco from the 70s. I like the softer rounded edges too, especially on such an angular quilt. Beautifully done. And thanks for noticing that, Anitra, because I agree with you. You're still getting the overall lines that Laura wanted to see, but just those softened corners help. And also because chances are I would not get all those 90-degree corners perfect. Not chances are, guaranteed I wouldn't, right? And that would really show when it's always parallel to a sewn line. So this helps to camouflage a little bit too. Any more questions? Yep, Jana. Good morning from Suncrest, Washington. Good morning, Jana. Yeah, who's the David Smith? You can tell when Susan is concentrating, she doesn't talk as much. You know, you might want to remember that tip, Dave. I'm just grabbing my coffee cup. Eva, you make it look so easy. Well, I don't know if you guys could see, but those first couple ones when I was really talking did not go as well. So I do have to concentrate, but relaxing is key. Alrighty, let's get our quilt advanced. So now you'll see some of the benefits of a floating top. So off come the magnets. The glasses can go back on the nose so we don't forget where we put them, right? Roll the whole thing forward. Hang on a second. The red snappers are a bit thick, and so when I'm rolling my quilt up, I have to give them clearance, if you will. And of course, there's a camera right in the way of that. And I certainly could have just left my needle down on the edge. I didn't even have to break thread there. I just did because I was doing it kind of mechanically. Okay, so where's the best camera to see? This way. Here's a couple of the beauties of the floating top. Again, I've done a bajillion of these quilts, so I would be apt to just tug this all. I'm grabbing my batting and everything and giving it a gentle tug, and it looks smooth. My sides look straight, etc., and I would probably just go on with it. But if you're not sure about that, it's very easy to just lift your quilt top up, and lo and behold, you can see the batting, and you can make sure that there's nary a ripple anywhere in it. It's rolling down straight in front of you, good to go. That is one of the beauties of a floating top. When I do larger quilts, I'll show you quickly. When I do larger quilts, I have this trusty tape measure that I can stretch across the top. So this is a long armor's tape measure. It's probably 16 feet long. And it starts in the middle at 0 and counts in both directions. Quite honestly, I don't really use that feature. I just look at what my measurement is on the right and what my measurement is on the left, and every time I advance the quilt, that's what I match up to. Just one more way to know that my quilt is going to be square. I chose not to use it in this one. I'm eyeballing it. That's just kind of experience has taught me that, and you know, again, it's only about 50 inches wide or 52, and so pretty easy to do. But that's one more check and balance, if you will. So now we're going to go back and just connect with our previous basting line. on both the right and left side of the quilt and continue it down as far as our sewing will go. So let's put our channel lock on again. Touch. So now I know that I'm getting a vertical line. Putting that wee bit of tension on behind my hopper foot again, on the area that's already been stitched. There we go. Now I will show you another favorite trick. For every machine, there's only so far forward you can stitch, right? Because either you hit this bar up here or the throat of your machine bumps in the back, and that's just as far forward as you can go. The worst thing in the world is to be quilting along, doing your best quilting, and bump against that barrier and have a square, you know, flower or whatever there. So here's my trick for that. You guys know I love painter's tape. If you're not sure of where that is in your mind's eye, then pull your machine forward as far as it will go and run a piece of tape across there so that you've got a very visual guide for your work surface, right? And now you know that if you quilt within that space, you will not bump, because my bump is about an inch further than that, or 3/4 of an inch. Make sense? So that is a super handy little tip. I mean, if it was a dark quilt, you could do a chalk line too, but then you've got to erase the chalk where the tape just pulls off. And the tape is also, whether you use blue or green or whatever color, it's super visual, so your eye, you know, you can see it out of the corner of your eye no matter where you're working. I love painter's tape. I don't necessarily love painting, but just tucking that little seam in there. That's one little seam allowance that was just coming apart a little bit. When I see that happen, too, I will often just go back and forth over that seam allowance a little bit with my basting line, just to add a tiny bit of reinforcement to it. Alrighty, we are basted. Another quick tip that I did earlier but I didn't talk about and you maybe didn't see, I reach under my sewing. Is there a way that we can see this? I reach under my sewing and I run my fingernail hard against the bottom of my stitching line, and that's a really quick and easy tension check. I can see on the top if my top thread is pulling too tight because it will look kind of straight instead of the individual stitches. I can't see that on the bottom, but I can feel it if I run my nail along the stitching line really firmly. If there's any eyelashing or laddering going on at all, I will hear that. My nail will literally tick, tick, tick across the stitches, and I'll know to make an adjustment. Sure, I'll take a question. Carrie, how would you go back and fill in if you missed an area? Oh, that's a hard question, Carrie. It depends on how bad it is, but you literally could just start and make another box in it. You could connect on one of the stitching lines that exists, do a few lock stitches, and just go and put in another box. I certainly have done that a time or two before. There's a pretty busy backing on this quilt, so you know, a little stopping and starting never hurt anyone, so you can do that. Generally, when I'm not, you know, talking and quilting at the same time, it's not a real big issue to just get it right the first time. But today I'm, you know, kind of doing a few things at once. So my little magnetic bars on the front holds everything in place. Side stretchers are on. We're good to go. Next pass. Now, this design obviously is not, you know, not like flowers or leaves or even feathers in that it's directional. But I make a practice of doing one pass across my quilt in one direction and doing the next one in the other direction. So this is why I said I wouldn't have had to break my thread here at the end of my basting line. This is right where I stopped the first one. I could have just put my needle down, rolled my quilt, and kept on quilting, because now I'm going to go in the other direction. It just keeps things looking organic. It keeps your sewing path from being as visible. And if you have flowers or leaves, it keeps them from all pointing in the same direction like a stiff wind is blowing. So then I just launch into the quilt and start again. And I'm just going to overlap the stitching from my previous pass, so it will all look seamless when it's done. And watch and see if you can recognize my basically diagonal movement across the quilt top too, as I do this pass. I'm seeing a little looseness, so I'm just going to go along and just tug the front of my quilt down a wee bit. It's probably only a 1/4 inch. It's just a little loose resting on the top there. And again, I'm using my visual check. You guys can't see me on camera, but I'm just stepping back a little, looking along the length of my front rail. You know, is this line straight? And you guys can see it. That seam line should be running nice and straight there. If I saw that it wasn't, I'd be taking measures, corrective measures. A teeny tiny little tuck there, so I'm just feeling with my nails if I'm going to be able to smooth that out, and I think yes. So it is tiny enough that if I come back later with a little spritz of water and just massage that tuck a little bit, it will smooth right out. It's so tiny and it's just under 1 stitch. But that's what I was seeing earlier when I said I see just a little bit of extra fullness in the fabric from top to bottom. I was seeing that happen, and I still am. So I'm going to start working now with one hand on the quilt, just putting a little bit of tension. What's happening is it's not that the quilt isn't flat, but just these long, straight lines of stitches that I'm sewing are pushing just a little bit, pushing the fabric ahead. So I'm having to take measures to deal with it. And in my case, it involves putting my left hand on the quilt and just putting a little tension on it. You guys have seen me do the bean can or vegetable can method before, which is just 2 cans of any canned goods that's got a little bit of weight to them, and set them on either side of your arm, the arm of your quilting machine, and that will work if you don't feel comfortable stitching with one hand. It'll accomplish the same purpose. This is just one of those things, you know, fabric does have a little bit of give to it, and we're seeing that at play. It's moving just a little bit as I stitch these long straight lines, and I'm having to compensate for it. There are a few areas here where I haven't stitched all the way down as far as I could have, but I don't want my pass to be sort of an obvious line, and so I'm going to let that be, and I'll just not advance, you know, quite as far with the next one, and leave myself room to go back up and stitch into those areas that could use a bit more quilting. I'll be honest with you guys, I am struggling with this a bit this morning, and I assume that it's just the fact that I'm talking too and not concentrating and getting in the groove as well. I might have to hold another consult with my client and make sure that she's satisfied with this. The more I relax, the more straight the lines are. But I've got a few wobbly ones, that's for sure. Like that. And here, I think you guys can see above in here, this is an area where I'm overlapping what was there previously, and I'm thinking, do I just want these boxes side by side as they are? Do I want to go back up in there and get some more overlap going on? There's no wrong or right to that, but sometimes it's wise to just pause and decide. And I decided I want some more overlap up in there. So do you see that? I just went back up here too. I'm just going to do a few more overlapping lines. I just feel like it's a bit boring. There we go. I'm happier with that. Now we'll kind of zigzag our way back down in our diagonal fashion again. This time I'll just leave needle down. Okay, any more questions while we work on advancing to the next pass? And this is not a large quilt, by the way, so there's 2 more passes to do. We're over halfway already. Jana, where did you get the white plastic side clamps? They're part of the red snap. I can't really get in the camera. They're part of the red snapper system. Now, when I acquired my red snappers, they were used. They were from a lady who already had them. So I bought a new set. Dave put a link in. It's Quilts on the Corner. There's corner anyway in the title of the store where I ordered them online. And they come in different lengths if you have a different throat size. Jana, there's a quilt show this Saturday the 24th in Rosalia, Washington. I know there is, Jana, but guess what I'm doing this Saturday? You guys won't believe it. I will be with my granddaughter in Canada on Saturday, if all goes well. So I'm missing the quilt show for that. Christine, good afternoon from the East Coast. Welcome. Thanks for joining, Christine. Monica, wonderful music. Isn't it great? Our friend Dan is so good and so gracious to let us use it. Marie, that helps to know you noticed that and compensated. That's part of that learning alongside someone that you mentioned. I've noticed that myself, and it's good to know someone else notices it too. Yes, and I think that's the advantage of you guys being able to see me do a project from start to finish, right? I'm not just showing you a little segment of something that I'm doing. You're getting to see it all together. And I think it was Carrie maybe that asked, what would you do if there was an area that didn't have enough quilting? And I was able to give her an answer. Like, I could literally go in and put in another box with rounded corners and a stop and a start, and that would fix that. That's what it looks like. Marie, so great to observe you making adjustments and admitting that your lines have wobbles. Well, you guys can see it, so it's no secret. Anitra, I struggle with wanting to quilt the bejeebers out of everything. Consistency definitely takes practice. This particular design, I think, is challenging. Yes, I'll give you another tip that I sometimes use is to, after I've quilted a little area, I'll kind of either trace it or just do something similar on a piece of paper or a plexiglass and put it beside my quilting machine. And when I advance, I'll look at it every time to make sure that I'm getting approximately the same level of boxes in this design to keep that scale consistent. Mickey, if you weren't quilting for us, would you be stitching with the regulator off? On a lot of designs I do, on this one I usually leave it on. You can see the pace I'm going. It's slower than some of the designs I do. And it's all about relaxing, and I think I might feel pushed a little bit with that on. That's just my preference. New hashtag, one-hand quilting. I am not the first one. Right after Bob Ross from Quilting. Yes. Okay, let's get going on advancing. See, there's just a little bit left. There's the end right there. So when I pull it, I'm actually grabbing batting and all right on this front roller and just giving a little tug. If I don't, there's fullness in this batting here. I can feel it. And in fact, if I flip this up, you can perhaps see it. And that will always happen in the center of the quilt. And if you just keep going, you'll end up with a batting that's got too much at the edges and it's been pulled up in the middle. So one way or another, you need to be checking for that. So either flip your top up and smooth everything out, or do as I do and just kind of come along and give everything a nice little tug. And then I do my visual checks. You know, are my seam lines straight along this rail? How does my batting look, or my quilt top if it's still hanging down? Is it, you know, hanging straight and even on the sides? Is it starting to pull? All those visual checks I look with every pass so that it doesn't get away from me. Monica, I still get thread breaks from working from right to left. Any tips? That is so common and so individual to each machine, and I'm happy that my Lucy is pretty good about it. I think my best tip, there we go, I'm kind of on camera. My best tip is going to be to try to shift the needle in one direction or another. And your dealer might have a good suggestion for one or the other. With mine, it's like instead of my needle pointing to 6 o'clock, it's at 5:30. It's that little bit to the right, and I do that on Lucy. If I don't, I will get thread breaks as well. So it has to do with the timing, with when the needle drops and the rocker passes it, and exactly when that stitch is formed. When you're moving in one direction, it's a little bit different than when you're moving in the other, and I'm sure there's a more technical explanation. But that would be the first thing I would give a try to, is just shifting the needle a hair. Jeannie, yay to seeing the grandchildren. Hope there are no forest fires in the area of BC you are going to. No, although I expect we'll be driving through some. We'll see. But the good news is we're also driving through, we call them the parks, Banff and Jasper. So they're national parks. Probably most of you have heard of them. We'll be driving through those, and that will be gorgeous. I might as well insert here too. I think I will still be away on the next scheduled live, but I think I will get on air and do something. I don't know what yet, but something that I can do either on a whiteboard for you guys or a topic. So I'll still be going live on that Monday unless something really drastic comes up. We are certainly pretty excited about getting to travel. While I fiddle with this little stuff, those of you who have seen my posts on social media in the last few days know that last week I was cooking in our church's youth camp, and we had about 100 people, I guess, that I was cooking for. So 12 meals. 1,200 individual meals overall. And it's funny. People laugh at me when I say I find it refreshing, but I do, because it's so different from what I do in my day job. So, I mean, it's all about cooking, but it's also about list making and organization and all that stuff. And it's just so different from what I typically do. So I've done it every summer for, I don't know, 9 or 10 years. And I just love it. Look forward to it every time. And by tradition, the final morning is always homemade cinnamon rolls. And I love bread baking, so that is a treat to be able to do that too. And then, of course, to eat them is a joy. Okay, side clamps are on. Basting is done left and right. I'm smoothing my front down nice and snug and putting my magnetic bars on. And then we're ready to go. Dave says I should warn you about your fingers in the magnetic bars. Let me show one on this camera. So they're kind of hollow in the end, and then the magnet's in the middle. So there is room for your finger there if you're careful. Some people I know have done, they have pre-drilled screw holes on them. So some people I know have actually put doorknobs on there for grabbing. I did that at one point, but the knobs kept coming loose and it was so annoying having to always tighten them. I've just learned where to put my fingers. But yes, you do not want your finger under there when it is grabbing. Ask me how I know. Okay, we were on this side, weren't we, when we stopped? So here's where I'll go to begin. I need my little yardstick and I can see it sagging. The whole thing up. There we go. So I just start and stop with a few, 5 or 6 stitches within that basting line at the side. Ooh, that was a wobbly one there. In general, like so much other quilting, it is not noticeable at the end. If I am mostly consistent, a few wobbly boxes just do not catch the eye. Saw me pause there. I didn't see that earlier line of stitching and I was just reassessing, do I want to stitch there or don't I? I do that sort of stuff all the time when I'm quilting freehand. Making small changes on the fly. And you see how I'm almost zigzagging back to this area where I want to be? Just to keep that diagonal movement pretty much in play. And so those diagonal lines, or zigzaggy lines, obviously are not boxes at this point. But you can see that doesn't matter. My overlapping lines as I keep quilting are what form the boxes. So this is really quite forgiving in terms of moving about the quilt top. And here's where we're going to make them into boxes. Type into the chat window if you would like to see the vegetable cans at work. You know, if you're newer and haven't seen that one before, just say so and I will go and fetch them and show you how I would use them. They kind of take the place of a third hand. The consensus? Are we wanting to see the cans? Want to vote yes? Okay, well, let's do it. I'll just step out of camera for a second and run and get my trusty vegetables. I cannot remember how I acquired these vegetable cans because this is not a thing we ever eat. But here are my vegetable cans, okay? So I will just set them on the two sides of this is my quilting arm under here. I think you can see. This is my quilting arm under here. And I can set those cans on both sides and they just put a slight stretch on my quilting surface. This works really well if you've got like a block or a border or some small area that's just got a bit of excess and you're not comfortable just quilting with one hand. Use these cans, and if you align them this way, they will roll out of the way as you come up to them. So, I mean, you have to shift them from time to time as you move across the quilt, but they will just roll away from you as you quilt closer to them. Now, I'm not going to be able to leave them on very long because this one is soon going to roll right off the edge, but you'll get to see how they work. And in a pinch, you could put one here too, if that's where you were finding the folds were occurring. But it is just like magic because it puts a very even and very gentle amount of stretch across the fabric. I'm not sure if that was in the camera when the can just rolled out of my way, but it just happens automatically. So really any small weight would do. The beauty of cans is their roundness and the fact that they roll out of the way. And it's a way to recycle something you didn't want to eat anyways. Which in my case was canned vegetables, which I think are pretty nasty. And I'm going to move it before it falls on the floor. So that's how the cans work. Here we are at the edge. I will take some comments now while I disassemble everything. We're just adjusting cameras here a minute so you can see me while I talk. All right. Which one are we on? Ah, okay. I'll roll ahead while Dave adjusts that, turns that scene on, and I'll be back in a minute in camera. There's the end of our quilt. Okay. Michelle, this quilt top and backing is so pretty, isn't it? Like I said, this client is really into using up her existing fabrics, and she's been sending me a number of scrappy ones, but the last few have been this navy and cream kind of color. So pretty. Monica, where did you buy your magnets? Answers in the link. Yes. Good thing that I will mention. On my website, just over the weekend, we made a new section, I guess, in my resources library page for all of my favorite tools. They are affiliate links, so you should know that, but I am recommending the ones which you see me using. You've seen my, my 9-inch ruler, obviously my magnets, my red snappers, just some of my favorite tools. So there are links to those in there if you wish. Jill, I watched both of your episodes when you quilted The Mountains Are Calling. My sister-in-law saw that I liked your post on Facebook and she asked me to make it for her, so I'll be ordering the pattern. Fantastic! And I'll rewatch the episode and attempt to custom quilt it with you as my inspiration. Thank you! And be sure and post pictures and tag me so that I see them. Just, yeah, if you don't tag me, then they can slip by without me even knowing. Jan, I love the blues in this quilt. I agree. And there's a real variety, which I can see close up, of calicos and then very modern things. But just the richness of the blues is very pretty. And did you notice, you may not be able to see it much, the backing is piece 2. It's big squares of the various blues put together. So Laura is determined to use up her blues, and she's doing a great job of it. I need my channel lock on, so I'm sure to get a straight line. To adjust a little, and here too you can see I'm using my by guess and by gosh method of squaring it up, which is just to shift it. I know my line of stitching is straight, so I'm just shifting my quilt to fall into line. But if you're not comfortable winging it like that, then by all means pin it in advance. And I'm going to advance the quilt just a hair more. I'm right at the limit of my stitching there, and I'm also going to lift up my roller. It's getting plump in the back there, and just I can feel the resistance a little bit. And it takes me a minute because it's right against the camera tripod. There we go. Let's just feel that out. Still, we're having trouble with wobbles this morning. Wobbly quilting lines, wobbly cameras. Okay, so here again, I'm going to put my vertical channel lock on. If you didn't have that one, you really might want to pin this front edge because you want a nice stretch on your quilt. So either do the little pinch hitting method with some type of clips to make your own lock. And I'm just going to get a clamp on this edge holding on it. This is for reals. This is how I quilt. It may not be the fanciest way, but I've just put a clamp on the right hand side to hold that taut. Now I've got my channel lock on, so I know I have a straight line, and I'm just feeding the fabric under there smoothly. Really carefully keeping my fingers all down because I am very close to the needle. Still got resistance on my roller. That's what I'm feeling. I'm fiddling with things there because I'm feeling this is not going smoothly like it ought to. There we go. Sorry about the wobbles. Okay. Much better. So I can either tuck the fabric in from the front or pull on the fabric that's already been stitched behind the hopper foot. Either way works to feed that fabric quickly enough under the needle, not letting it push out in front. Because see, at this seam, that would want to push forward. Even if it's only a thread's width times however many seams there are, that would very much give me an unsquare quilt at the end. I'm also putting a little tension, pulling it a little longer. You can't do that a whole bunch. You can't really stretch the quilt, but you can pull it snug. Just enough that it follows my straight stitching line. And now when this quilt is finished, I know that it is square. It's got 90-degree corners. It's got perfectly straight lines, top and bottom, left and right side. And I'm pretty confident, certainly within 1/4 of an inch, that we've got a square quilt. And see, my tension here again is my pressure is on the area that's already been stitched so that I don't get a ripple of fabric pushing up behind my hopper foot. All right, we don't need the magnets anymore. We do need the stretchers on both ends. I will be starting on, where did we end, folks? I ended on the right. I'm starting on the right. A couple of questions or comments. As soon as I get this gripper on, I will pause for a second and answer them. Okay, let's have it. Jana, do you find it easier to long arm a quilt when there is no outer border? Like, do you mean in terms of squaring it up or in terms of laying down the design? Because when it's just an edge-to-edge design, it doesn't really matter to me. If that makes sense. I was going to say something else too, and now it has escaped me. But anyway, this is the last pass, so if you do have any more questions or comments, or even requests for upcoming patterns, this is the time to be putting them in the chat window. And if there's anyone new checking in, I am Susan Smith. I've got to do this before I stitch. I'm Susan Smith. You're in my Stitched by Susan studio. This live and unscripted episode, like many of mine, is doing edge-to-edge freehand quilting across an entire project. So we started right at the beginning with loading it, my whole process for that, basting it, deciding on the design, the thread choice, all that stuff, and then we've quilted the whole thing from start to finish so that you get the big picture view of what it looks like from beginning to end. So if you have enjoyed this episode, would you like and subscribe on my YouTube channel? And if you'll hit the bell, then you'll be notified when new episodes come up. He's looking at me with questions in his eyes. I am finding it difficult to talk while I'm doing this design, so I will say just a couple more things before I dive back into it. I wanted to mention last week's podcast. If you, of course, I can't think of the date. Must have been about the 14th. It's on a Wednesday. It came out. Anyway, if you've been listening to my podcast and enjoying it, thanks very much for listening. I've been getting lots of comments on it. But last week's was particularly fun. I actually went to a private quilt museum in Genesee, Idaho, which is not too far from me, so that I could interview this lady and we could be touring and talking about her quilts, kind of as part of the process and making it a little more personal. She has made so many quilts that she literally has a private museum with them all, and they are amazing. She has such a quirky sense of humor, and it comes through so much in her quilts. It was just a great visit with her, and I think a great podcast episode too. So check that one out, podcast.stitchedbysusan.com. Okay, back to stitching. Again, overlapping over my previous lines and boxes, so it will all look seamless when it's done. We were talking about the Mountains Are Calling quilt, and I do have some more good photographs of that one, which I'll be posting this week. I have a couple of in-progress ones that I want to put up first, and then I'll put a series of the quilting ones, so that would give you some good photos for reference on that. When you see me slow down, that's me thinking, oh, okay, where do I need to go next? Where does it need more coverage? How do I not get boxed into a corner? For those of you who are local, and there are a couple of you that are at least within a couple of hours driving distance of me, Jana was mentioning earlier the outdoor show in Rosalia, Washington, which is coming up on the 24th of July. And it's a new show. I think they only did one before the pandemic, and this will be their second one. But it is a little outdoor show, and I think it would be a real treat to attend. So I'm pausing because I just ran out of bobbin thread. So time to change it. Most machines, including mine, have a method for counting bobbin revolutions and telling you, predicting when you're going to run out and things like that. I choose not to do that because, you know, when you change thread types or whatever, it's never really accurate, on my machine at least. I choose to just let it go till it runs out, and then I undo about 2 inches of stitching because the last little bit does not have proper tension on it. And then I will just do, overlap a couple of stitches, and start off again. And I just drop my seam ripper where that is because it's in a busy blue and I'll have a hard time finding it when I come back. I'll drop my seam ripper there and go out of camera for just a moment and grab my new bobbin. I load my own bobbins. I have a freestanding winder, and I just, when I grab one, I start another. Although in this particular moment I didn't, because I know this is the last one I need for this quilt. But I like to have matching thread top and bottom. That's just a preference. You certainly could use preloaded bobbins, but I like matching ones, so I just have one spool on my bobbin winder and one spool on my machine. So I've just overlapped probably 3 stitches or so, done a few little lock stitches in there, and off I go. And then I'll come back and trim those tails, and that's it. Another one of those small tucks, but again, it's definitely small enough that if I moisten it a little bit and manipulate the fabric a little bit, I can work that in quite smoothly. So that might be something that you could eliminate with doing this on a bit smaller scale. Remember I talked about earlier I had decided to try and have my quilting, you know, no more than 2 inches apart anywhere, but still my boxes are on the bigger side. So you could change your quilting path a little bit to maybe not do as long straight lines as I'm doing, or just make it closer overall. Any one of those things might help to reduce those little pleat issues that I'm getting. But I'm not going to change my scale now, so I'm just going to try and deal with them as best I can. Maybe an answer for me is just to turn corners oftener. Keep the boxes a similar size, just not do the long expanses that I've been doing, a straight line. So all these things are ways that you can think through what you're quilting, make little changes that just might help. So I don't know if that's visible in your close-up camera, but I'm trying now to keep my lines under about 4 inches. And that's helping. Not everyone, obviously. I just did a big one, but... So I don't think I'm making any smaller boxes. I'm just turning corners oftener. Almost there. Oh, I did not put my yardstick on. Did you see that bump? One of my, I don't know what I call them, clamps on my track just bumped up against my little side clamp. But I was able to catch it before it made a big wobbly mess. And there we are, at the end. Yay us. Okay, any more thoughts or questions? I'm just going to take the rails off so that we can see each other, or at least so you can see me. I would really enjoy being able to see you guys. Someday there will be a way we can do all that. Let me me get a few more sips of coffee before we unload. Dave's just making fine-tuning adjustments. There we go, on the camera. Look at my little curls. It's a hot day today. Okay, Carrie, do you have a preferred thread? I do. I use 99% of the time, almost 100. I use Isacord 100% poly. And it's a 40 weight thread, but I think feels a little finer to me. Anyway, I'm satisfied with it, and it's pretty much what I always use. Couple things I love about it. I buy it wholesale and I get a really great price on it. And that's just as easy as getting your reseller's permit to get that and a few phone calls. They have over 300 colors, which I love. I love being able to have, I don't know what I have on my rack, maybe 7 shades of white, cream, tan. And so with this quilt, for example, I wasn't stuck with doing a cream that was close to this fabric. I could pick a couple shades darker because I have several shades to choose from. So I love all the colors. And then because it's 100% poly thread, it's strong. It was built for embroidery machines. That's what it was designed for. So high-speed stitching. It's a strong thread and very low lint. So that's one of the great things about any polyester thread. Okay, Lori, darn, looks like I joined right at the end. Well, the replay is also always available, and you can even ask questions after the fact, by the way, and I usually circle back around and type in an answer anyway. So it's all good. Barbara, just discovered you and am new to pre-motion quilting. Well, I'm glad you discovered me. Welcome, Barbara. In case there are a few more just joining in, this is a live and unscripted episode, and I do these the first and third Monday of each month. And it usually involves a quilt from loading right through to finish so that you get to see the big picture view of a whole project done in my studio. And it is most often freehand and edge to edge, meaning the same quilting design is laid out over the whole quilt. No thread changes, no separate borders, things like that. Occasionally I'll slip a special one in. So, yes. Any more comments? Carrie, is there a link to this music on your resource page? It is quite lovely, and I like your idea to play music as we quilt. Okay, Dave's answering this in the chat. There's not a link. You just have to keep coming back. I don't know what else to say. Okay, you guys see my coffee? Fairly important to me in the mornings. These episodes are all free, and they're going to continue to be that way. But as you might imagine, it does take some camera equipment, and we're constantly trying to improve. So if you look at my episodes from even 2 months ago, you'll see that the camera is clearer. We recently purchased a new camera, so we're always trying to upgrade our equipment. So if you wish to support us, you can go to buymeacoffee.com, and there you can either do a one-time donation for as little as $5, or you can join the Coffee and Cream Club, and it's $5 each month. And that just helps us continue to upgrade our equipment for you. Monica, thank you for sharing your knowledge. Enjoyed watching and listening very much. Excellent. Thanks for joining in. Penny, enjoyed watching and learning from you. Appreciate that, Penny. Okay, that's all the comments. So I'm going to unload. We'll stay on a few minutes while I do that, so you can kind of see the reverse process. And again, if you're just tuning in, at the beginning I did spend a little time talking about the process of loading, at least the method that I use. It's very quick. I quilt for hire for people, so I'm all about finding efficient ways to do things. I want high quality, but I also want efficiency. Fran, thanks from Oklahoma. Nice. So glad you all tuned in today. This is great. Okay, let's loosen the tension. And I will hold it up so that you can see it. Of course, it's difficult to kind of see live on camera. So within the next couple of days, as soon as I have some good light in the studio, I will take some good photographs of the quilting and post them on social media. Stitched by Susan is where you'll find me. Facebook and Instagram, there will be some pictures. So you can get a good close-up look at some of the quilting and some of the pretty fabrics. Even unloading is just a minute with these red snappers, as you can see. They are my tool of choice. I mentioned that the backing was pieced too. Can you see that? Just in the same types of blue fabrics that are on the front. Let's get all this batting out of the way, and I'll do my best to hold it up a little bit for you. You can see the zigzag design. There it is. So watch for photographs. I'll put some good close-up shots so you can see kind of the tan thread color that I chose, and then close-up, obviously, of the quilting design. So thanks so much for joining me. Once again, I'm Susan Smith of Stitched by Susan. Stitched by Susan. It has been my pleasure to quilt with you. Catch you next time.